The brook glides continuously, but its water is ever changing. Bubbles break here while they form there. They never remain the same. The same fate is shared by men in the world and by the houses of men. Indeed, one might think that the abodes of high and low, constructed into a magnificent city, would outlive the generations, but few of them, if well observed, resist the destruction of time. Some were brought to ruin last year and have now been rebuilt. Other splendid mansions have been reduced to small dwellings. As it is with the houses, so it is with the owners. No doubt the abodes and peoples are really the same in place and number. I can, however, see only 1 out of 10 people I used to know in the days before. Some die in the morning, others are born in the evening. Bubbles in the brook form and break. Ignorant are we whence we come into this world and whither we return. And we know not what it is that troubles us in this unreal world, and what affords us delight in the temporary show of things. As the master and his house in the flickering world of change, so is the dew-pearled morning glory. Some outlive the vanishing dew only to wither in the first sunshine. Some droop even while the dew remains, but none lives to see the evening. It is more than 40 years since I first knew the heart of things. During that time I have observed many wonderful events. The 28th of April in the 3rd year of Angen was a day of great winds. The night was wild and boisterous. At about 8 o'clock a fire broke out in the southeastern part of the city and spread northwest, as far as the Shujakumon, the Daigokuden, and the Daigakuryo, and the Minbusho. During that night, they were all reduced to ashes. It was said that the starting point of the Holocaust was a temporary dwelling at Tomino Koji, where a sick man was dwelling. Harried by the wind, the fire spread from there in the shape of an open fan. The distant houses were enveloped in smoke, while the nearer ground licked by tongues of fire. Sparks soared aloft, reflecting in the night sky, made a brilliant display. And flames cut off and blown by the wind flew over a space of 1 or 2 cho away and found new quarters there. The dwellers, of course, were panic-stricken and at their wits' end. Some fell choked with smoke, others were seared to death by flame. Those fortunate ones who were saved from death nevertheless lost all their treasures. Everything was reduced to ashes, so that it was quite impossible even to compute the amount of loss. In this fire, 16 mansions belonging to those of the highest position were burned to the ground, as well as innumerable others. 1/3 of the city was a ruin. Thousands of men and women, as well as an immense number of cattle, fell victim to the flames. Thinking over all human endeavors undertaken in vain, it would seem that the worst is that undertaken by those people who took so much pain, trouble, and expense to reside in such a dangerous city. Again, on the 29th of April in the 4th year of Jisho, a mighty whirlwind arose at Nakano Mikado, Kyogoku, and it traveled as far as Rokujo. Wandering a few cho in one gust, it broke all the houses in its path, crushing some entirely flat to the ground. In some, only the beams and pillars were left, and in some the roofs of the gates blown off and carried violently over a distance of 4 or 5 cho. Fences were blown and boundaries vanished, making 2 residences one. Many rare treasures were whirled up into the sky. Thatches from roof were whipped up and scattered as if they were leaves in the winter wind. Dust, blown up like smoke, blinded the people. The howling of the wind made hearing impossible and made people think of the evil wind of hell. Many houses were destroyed and numberless people killed and maimed while trying to mend their houses. The wind traveled toward the southwest, to the great grief of those who lived there. Of course, a storm wind is to be expected, but people have never seen such a powerful one. I thought it was surely a cursed symptom of something serious. This example will serve to show how difficult and unstable is human life and how uncertain are we and our houses. Then think upon the cares and troubles we experience according to our social situations. Those of low situation who receive the favor of those in high place may indeed be steeped in pleasure for the moment, but cannot be happy long. They are forced to restrain their grief and choke back their tears. In every aspect of their behavior they are filled with fear, as if they were sparrows close by the nest of a hawk. The poor living next door to a rich house are always ashamed of their wretched condition. They cannot be easy in mind, even for a little while, seeing the envy of their wives and children and viewing the disdainful attitude of their rich neighbors. If he lives in a small place jammed up close with houses, he cannot be free from fires. If in an unfrequented one, he is subject to inconvenience in coming and going, and may be in danger of burglars. Those men who hold influence are often avaricious, and single men are contemptuous of others. Wealth gives birth to care, while poverty is always the parent of grief. Dependence makes one another's slave, while charity obliges one to be affection's servant. If one acts according to the ways of the world, he will be troubled. If he acts as he likes, he may seem insane. Where and how shall we enjoy a moment's peace of existence? I inherited my paternal grandmother's estate and lived there for a long time. Afterward, however, I was bereft of influence and enfeebled by frequent misfortunes, till at last, when 30 years of age, I made up my mind to give up the estate and build a hut to live in just as I liked. When compared with the residence in which I had lived, this one was scarcely larger than 1/10. It was nothing but a living room of my own, scarcely deserving the name of a house. I built a mud wall, but could not afford a gate. A storage place for a vehicle was constructed, with bamboo pillars supporting the roof. When it was windy and snowing, the hut was exposed to considerable danger, and close by the river bank as it was in danger of being flooded, moreover, of being attacked by burglars. So even here I have been troubled with the disagreeable earthly cares for these 30 years. The occasional accidents that came to me against my will were a constant reminder of bad luck. So when I became 50, I left the house and the world altogether. Since I had no wife and children, there was nothing I found hard to give up. Did I, who was not a pensioner, long for my former position? Spent in vain many springs and summers among the clouds of the hills of Ohara. Then, when the dew of 60 years was vanishing, I built a hut where I intended to pass my older days. It could be compared to a hunter's shelter for the night, or the cocoon of an old silkworm. As small as the other was, this hut is scarcely 1/100th of its size. My life was declining, and my abode was reduced whenever I moved. Its structure was like that of no ordinary house. The room was 10 feet by 10, its height less than 7 feet. Since I had no mind to settle in a definite place, I did not decide on a fixed one. My hut consisted of a clay floor, thatched roof, and planks linked together with hooks in such a way that they could easily be disassembled if I found anything against my will. How little the expense to change my home! 2 carts were enough to carry the house. I had only to pay their small hire. Since I secluded myself in the innermost recess of Hino, I have made a temporary blind on the south side of the hut. Under the blind I laid a bamboo mat, along the west wall a water shelf, and in the house I hung an image of Buddha, that his brow might shine in the evening sun. Also I hung a picture of Fugen and of Fudo on each of the door leaves. On the little shelf above the sliding door you might find 3 or 4 trunks of black leather, containing some extracts of Japanese songs, music, Ojoshu, and so forth. By their side against the wall I placed a koto and a biwa, which I called origoto and tsugibiwa, respectively. On the east side was my bed, made of a straw mat with fern fronds beneath it. Beneath the window in the eastern wall was placed a writing desk. Beside my pillow was a brazier for making wood fire. To the north of the hut and close by a broken hedge was my small garden, planted with several medicinal herbs. This, then, was my temporary dwelling. Now I will describe for you the conditions around. Water is stored in a stone reservoir and comes in through a pipe on the south side of the hut. Since the woods are close by, I can easily get logs and firewood. The place is called Toyama. The valley is covered with thickets, but it opens up towards the west, and is convenient for me to sink in the meditation of the paradise in the west. In spring I see wisteria in full bloom to the west, purple clouds on the hills. In summer I can hear the cuckoo singing his mournful notes, and I talk with the bird, asking that I shall be guided when I leave this world for the mountain of death. As for the autumn, the shrill chirp of the cicada can be heard everywhere. To me, they sound as if they were lamenting over this unstable world. In winter, snow which accumulates in depth and then melts away may be compared to human sins. If I feel inclined, I dispense with saying prayers and reading books, for which no one could admonish me, and of which I was never ashamed before any friend. Although I make no special effort to keep silent, the solitude prevents me from the sins of the tongue. Having no companion, I have no chance to enter into conversation, and thereby am saved from sins of the tongue. I have no chance to break the canons of Buddha, even though I take no great pains not to do so. When at morn I think of the white ripples left in the ship's wake, I sit on the riverbank and watch the boats passing to and from Okanoya, and compose verses in the mood of Manchami. In the evening, listen to the rustle of the cinnamon leaves. I think of the scene in the bay of Jinyo, and play on the biwa after the style of Gen Totoku. When my mood of amusement is not gone, I play sometimes a note of autumnal wind accompanied by the echoes of pines. When I hear the water singing, I play the song of the flowing stream. Unskillful as my art is, I am satisfied with playing for myself, not to refresh others. At the foot of the hill stands another small cottage, built of brushwood, where the keeper of the hill lives. He has a young son who often visits me. When I have time to spare, I take a stroll with him. Separated in age as we are, he being 16 and I 60, we feel then equally refreshed and amused. Sometimes we pluck the great rush flowers or gather cranberries, and sometimes we fill our baskets with wild potatoes or parsley. Occasionally we go down to the water fields around the hill and gather fallen ears of corn to weave a mat. In fine weather I climb up the top of the hill to behold my native place in the distance and enjoy the views of Kowatayama, Fushimi, Toba, and Hatsukaze, splendid views which belong to none but him who looks at them. Thus I can amuse myself freely. When I'm not tired and feel like walking farther, my mind flies afar along the tops of the hills. I cross over Sumiyama, pass beyond Kasadori, and make a pilgrimage to Iwama, and worship at Ishiyama. Sometimes I visit the remains of the old Semimaru over the plains of Awazu, or cross the river Tagami to worship at the tomb of Sarumaru Tayu. Often I return home with cherries, maple branches, ferns, or fruits according to the season. Some of these I offer to Buddha, and some I take as presents. The moon shining in at my window on a calm night makes me remember the men of old, and monkeys' cries moisten my sleeve with tears. Fireflies in the sward gleam like the torchlights of Makinoshima. A morning shower sounds to me like the wind rustling through the leaves. A wild bird's note makes me wonder whether it is my father or mother. The heart coming close by my hut reminds me how far I am from the world. Sometimes I stir up the ash-covered charcoal and make it an old man's companion after a midnight dream. Though the forest is not very dense and terrible, Owls' moping voices arouse pity in me. Such scenes are never exhausted here on this hill. Those who think profoundly and feel sensitively would find more of interest here than I do. When I first settled here, my idea was to stay in this hut only for a short time. Since then, 5 years have passed. My temporary dwelling has become a permanent one. Leaves accumulated deep under the eaves have decayed, moss grown on the floor. Since I came to the hill, I have heard that many noble persons have passed away. Still more of the humble must have left this world. How many houses I can count which were burned in raging fire. Only the small shed is cozy and free from such fear. Though not spacious, it is enough to shelter me. I have a bed by night and a seat by day. The Gona likes a little shell to live in because he knows content. The fishhawk lives on a rough beach, for it is afraid of men. In such a way I think of myself. Aware of myself and of the world, I have nothing to desire and no friend to seek. To be quiet in mind, to be troubled with nothing, these are my happiness. People generally do not build their houses for themselves, but for their families, or friends, or tutors, or lords, or even for their oxen, horses, and treasures. I, however, made a house for myself alone, because I have no such things to consider, live with, or rely upon. What is called friendship in this world is respect for the rich and open-handed and indifference to the righteous and kind. It would be better for us to make friends with music and nature. Servants mind only rewards and punishments and think highly of those who favor them. No matter how kindly they may be treated, they are never quiet, but always complaining about something. It would be better to make ourselves our own servants. Then if we have something to do, we can use our own hands and legs. This, though somewhat troublesome, is far easier than employing others. When I have somewhere to go, I employ my own legs. This is far less irksome, though painful, than to care for a horse or vehicle. Now we use ourselves in a double way, employing our hands as our servants and our legs as our vehicles. The mind is satisfied with them. It knows our body's troubles, it may employ them when fresh, and allow them to rest when tired. So it need never become mortified if the body is idle. Moderate walking and work are good for health. How then should we sit doing nothing? To trouble others is a sin. Why should we ask others for help? I live substantially the same way with regards to diet and clothes. A garment of Fuji and a bed quilt of hemp are enough to cover my body. And the great rush flowers in the fields and fruits from the hill will preserve me from hunger. Though poorly clad, I am no object of ridicule here in solitude. My meals, scanty as they are nevertheless delicious. I do not intend to adduce these things as a sermon for the well-off, but merely to compare my own present life with that I formerly led. Envy and fear have left me since I gave up the world. Without regret and without reluctance, I rely only upon heaven's will and no more. I regard myself but as a cloud floating in the sky, neither relying on anything nor being dissatisfied with what comes to me. Pleasure in life is found only in the moment's sleep over the pillow of the dreamer, and desires in life are found in the beautiful of nature. All things in the world come from only one mind. How useless treasures and palaces are, if the mind is uneasy. Here in solitude, I love my lonely cottage and feel pity for those who toil in the dusty city, though I should be ashamed to become a beggar there. If you doubt what I say, you only have to look at birds and fishes. Fishes like water. None but fishes know the reason. Birds are fond of woods, but only birds know why. It is the same with my seclusion. Its pleasure can never be enjoyed by those who have not. I have but little left of life now. I approach nearer and nearer to the peak of death, as the moon slides down the sky towards the mountain top. Just as I am about to start for the dark land of death, how should I trouble myself with earthly cares? The teaching of Buddha is to love no earthly things. It would be a sin even to love this mossy cottage. It might also be an obstruction in the way of salvation, should I repose on the lap of tranquility, woe to them who waste their time wallowing in the pleasures of no value. One still morning, when I was sunk in meditation over this, I asked myself, to escape from the world and live amongst woods and hills is only to set one's mind at ease and practice one's principles. And yet you, although you look like a sage, have an impure mind. Your conduct is even inferior to that of the Shuribandoku, though your hut resembles that of Jomyo Koji. Is it the effect of poverty that troubles you, or is it the influence of impurity that makes you mad? I could answer nothing to the question, but said prayers twice or thrice for mere form's sake. The last day of March, the second year of Kenriki, monk Renin at the hut of Toyama. At last, the moon will lose light behind the hill if it could only shine forever in the sky.